The tehuana dress is an embroidered dress. It's a two-piece set, and it's made up of the top, which is the huipil, and it comes from the Nahuatl word huipili, which means adorned blouse or adorned dress, depending on the context. The bottom half is called an enagua, and that's just the Spanish word for skirt. But they're both embroidered. The tehuana dress originates from the isthmus of Tehuantepec, tehuana, and that is also coincidentally what the women of the isthmus are called, tehuanas. The dress is typically made out of velvet or silk. Velvet, in my personal experience, is the most typical. And the material itself is either black, deep wine, red. There are some cases where I've seen lighter colors like yellow, but that's more rare. It is embellished and decorated with embroidered flowers, large flowers that are typical to the isthmus of Tehuantepec. And the bottom of the skirt is sort of lined with some lace, and I think it's called elolan, and they attach that by hand. There's also the flowers in the hair and the jewelry, and particularly the coin necklace. And a fun tidbit about the necklace is that when it first originated and came about, the individuals that were wearing those coin necklaces were actually wearing their life savings around their neck. So they were just walking around with all their money. The head covering is called a resplandor, and it just means resplendent in Spanish, and that's exactly what it does when the wearer puts it on. It adds this splendor to them, and it is solely used for religious services or ceremonies, not so much every day. People don't really walk around wearing them. The tehuana dress has a very specific appearance. I think that once someone sees it, they know of it as being from the isthmus, it's immediate. It's an immediate association to the isthmus. It differs in the cut. It's a much more rigid cut than a lot of the other dresses. A lot of other attires or the regional attires tend to have flowier skirts, longer skirts. Some of them are shorter, but again, they have more movement to them, and that is especially seen when they are when the dresses are being worn in dancing or in ceremonies and whatnot. When there's a lot of movement involved, you can really see the dress going about. When it comes to the tehuana, the skirt is lifted towards them, like from the middle. They grab it, they lift it up, and they have a lace petticoat under. So it's this nice game of like peekaboo with that. And so when they're dancing, they sort of sway side to side. But it's not something that you would see like a flamboyant kind of movement. It's very graceful and regal and slow. The tehuana is largely worn by the women of the isthmus. In terms of social class, the more elaborate the tehuana, the higher your social class is. If you want a very detailed tehuana with lots of flowers, lots of embroidery, that's more labor, that's more work, that's more money. Therefore, you come from a higher social class. It speaks to age in the sense that I've seen little girls wearing tehuanas, but I think it's more common for young women to start wearing them once they reach a certain age, sort of like a coming of age, and wear them until they're older. I've seen 80, 90-year-old women wearing these beautiful dresses that they've had forever. The history of the dress isn't particularly well kept in the sense that it's been around for so long that we don't know when it started or how it started out. We have bits and pieces that we can piece together. One of the earliest recordings or evidence that we have is prints, and they typically depict women walking around with a wraparound skirt and the lace headpiece. And the other bit that we have is the writing. When people would visit the isthmus, they would remark or notice the women's dress. They would talk a lot about the dress, the embroidery, the way that the women carried themselves, the grace with which they carried themselves, the regal look of the headpiece. It became what we know today in the mid-18th century when a mestiza woman, which is of indigenous and Spanish descent, by the name of Juana Cata Romero, imported the textiles from abroad, the U.S. and the Europe, and also brought with her the styles that were trending in that time period. And so she turned because she was mestiza herself, she had the trust of the community already, and she knew how they dressed, and she knew what their skills were in terms of embroidery. So when she brought these textiles to them, she knew that they could turn it into something that was uniquely their own and that uniquely spoke to their identity as mestiza women, as both indigenous and Spanish, and people who were moving between those social classes and those identities. She was the one that incorporated the lace headdress. She was the one that incorporated the coin necklace, the jewelry, and she turned it into something that was solely unique to the Isthmus. There wasn't a dress like this anywhere else in Mexico. It was only in the Isthmus that you could see it, and it was the women who were wearing them. The history of the dress is nuanced in the sense that it speaks to the history of colonialism in Mexico, and it speaks to gender in Mexico. And what I mean by that is that it is a dress of indigenous descent. It is a dress worn by indigenous women, but it is not purely indigenous in the sense that the materials that the dress were made out of are not of the region. They were imported. They were brought about because of Spanish colonialism and Spanish rule. And to go even further, those textiles under Spanish colonial rules or norms wouldn't have been available to the women making the dresses because of their social status, because of their indigenous identity. Because they were indigenous women, they were not allowed to work with those materials or even wear them. So the fact that these women not only wore them, but also made them uniquely their own by embroidering them the way that they only know how, it speaks to that resilience and to that strength and to that their identity, their story. In terms of gender, I've largely spoken about how it is the women that wear them, but there is also another community within the Isthmus that wears the dress, and they are the Muxes. The Muxes are the Isthmus's third gender. They are people who are assigned male at birth, who later take on the traditional feminine roles, whether that's doing the chores around the house or taking care of their parents. They go about and take on the feminine role in the community while neither being man or woman. They are somewhere in between, and they speak to the gender's spectrum. There is one particular artist, Lucas Avendaño, who is a Mux performer. He's an activist, and he talks about Mux identity and how they are not confined to one thing. They are everything. And I think that that's truly beautiful, and it adds so much to the dress because once you know that and you look at the dress, you see all of that. You see how it speaks to resilience of all forms, not solely just to women, but to other people as well. And it speaks to that rich history. It speaks to joy. It speaks to their fight. It speaks to their identity. It speaks to so many things, and I think that that's what makes it so beautiful. When I started working at Spurlock, I was an undergrad, and my first task was looking through the museum collections database. And I think that was largely an exercise just to get used to the database and to how it worked. But I ended up getting really excited about some of the Mexican garments that we had in the collection. And I noticed that there was a lot of everyday items and some mourning items. And while I was glad to see there, again, was nuance within the collection, I couldn't help but wonder where joy was and where joy fit into this. And I thought, well, there needs to be some balance. And that's how I came to be inspired to do this exhibit. I said, okay, well, let me bring some joy into it. And I think that tehuana is a really great way and a great place to start because it speaks to that joy and that resilience that we were talking about earlier. I am Mexican American, and my parents are undocumented. So when I was younger, I was unable to travel back home. And the way that my parents sort of made up for the distance between myself and the motherland was bringing the motherland to me. And a way that they did that was through dance. And so I was a ballet folklorico dancer, which is just folkloric dancing, from the 1st grade to the 8th grade. And through that extracurricular program, I was able to get to know Mexico through dress, through music, through dance. And I came to love those dresses because they were my connection to Mexico. I couldn't visit the land, but it felt like the land it came to me somehow through those dances, through all the colors and the twirling and the dancing. So I when I see them, I feel love, and I feel like I'm looking at a relative. And I wanted to bring that joy into the museum.